Hi everybody, it's crazy. It's Monday and it's time for the UPBGE video of the week. Now, before I get started, gotta give a shout out to my trusted because you guys rock. To my crazy fam, I love you guys. And to my patrons, thank you for your continued support. Now, we're up to episode number 34, and of course, I still have not got my green screen up. I do got a new little screen I'm gonna try out next week, hopefully. So cross your fingers you get to see my ugly mug again. But this week we left off with, let me see if I can do this right. Yep. Okay, so we left off with armatures, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so armature. Armature is an advanced sensor to help you detect error thresholds on bone constraints. Okay, which is this figure right here. Okay, see, it was created as part of the IK solver implementation integrated by the developer. I'm not going to say his name. If you know his name and you can pronounce it, cool. But I'm going to call him BB for short. All right, so this is what the armature looks like. And if we switch over to that one, oops, that one, nope, not that one, that one, there we go. Okay, I still got to get used to this. Okay, if you have an armature, in other words, if you create a bone, we're going to go Shift A, create a armature, single bone. Okay, delete the cube, X. Okay, there goes our single bone. All right, so if you, with that, if you click on that, you can actually use pose mode. You also have a new sensor in here called the armature. And as you see, it looks similar to the other one. Okay, now there's plenty of different ones you can try or put in, and we're going to go into a couple of those. And I'm not seeing the second one like as it is on here. That one doesn't have a bone constraint or bone, it just has the bone. So that's what we're looking at. All right. Now there's an armature actuator as well. Okay, so you have two different armatures, but we're going to go with this one for right now. Okay, see, the original goal of this set of functionalities was targeted at robotic studios, so it may rest outside the scope of your project. If you're going to use IT, instantaneous task specification using constraints, that's what the acronym was. It was ITASC. This sensor will help you keep track of your armature constraints. Okay, so let me switch back over to that real quick so you can see. Okay, that website right there, I will probably try to see if I can put that in the description. If not, just write it down here. It's actually in the game engine book. When you go to look at the book itself, this will be highlightable that you can bring up. Okay. All right. The Caesar. What is Caesars? Okay. The armature sensor is only available for armature objects. If you copy this sensor to non-armature objects, the panel will show sensor only available for armatures, and the sensor will be inoperative. Okay, so let's switch back over to here. Okay, so if you switch over to, let's add a add a cube in here. Let's just add a plane to be easier. Okay, you can't add that armature modifier in here. There isn't one because it's not an armature. It has to be an armature for it to work. Okay, now I know it says armature here, but you can name that anything. You can even call it bone over here, bone. Okay, you can call it bone and it'll be the same thing. Okay, it's just that this is an armature sensor and this is an armature actuator. Okay, but it does not mean that, the name of the armature has to be armature. So it's just, you can name it anything you want. But if you name the bone, which is, for example, bone, okay, now the constraint pops up. You can constrain it to whatever constraint you have. Fortunately, I don't have no constraint for it, so there's more about this later on in the book as well. So we're going to tap a little bit later on in this. This just gets you more aware of the different sensors and actuators that are actually in the logic brick system. Okay. So the next one is, let's see here, touch. Okay, so let's go back over here. Let's see if we got touch. I don't see touch on any of that, so yeah, I don't see touch. So that's one of them ones. So the touch sensor is a subset of the collision sensor. Actually, they share the same code internally. It's likely to be depreciated in the future. So in other words, touch is no longer in there because it's been depreciated by the collision sensor, okay? Which is the next one we're going to talk about. The collision sensor can be used to detect collisions between a game object and other objects or the environment. Okay? Now, as you see, this is a collision sensor right here. It's got a lot of the same features that you have in the header, but then this right here changes. Okay? You can filter the collision to only trigger the sensor when the object hits a face with a specific material or an object with a particular property. Use the M/P button to toggle between them. So that would be this, okay? That would be material, that would be property, okay? As with physics sensors, this sensor is dependent on the physics properties of the objects involved in the interaction, a collision, ghost, bounding box, and so on. Look at chapter 6, Physics, to read about the physics settings for the objects in the game. So we'll go on a little bit more about that one a little bit later on in chapter 6. Okay? This sensor is often used with collision proxies, which are invisible low poly meshes created to spare your heavy graphic objects from the expensive collision tests. Alright? Use it moderately. Together with other physics sensors, this sensor is considered to be expensive computation-wise. So use it reasonably and use physics proxies whenever possible. A topic discussion in chapter 6 and chapter 8, workflow and optimization. That'll help with that. Okay, now the near sensor. Near sensor. So I was looking at, I'm actually trying to keep this under 15 minutes, so bear with me, folks. Alright, so for more advanced control over the physics interaction of your game, you can trigger actions based on the distance of the objects in your scene before they even collide. Unlike the collision sensor, the near sensor is only sensitive to property detection. Okay, so you can only, it has to have a certain property. Like if it gets too close to the bone, for example, then it will do something. Okay, it will trigger. Okay, leave the property blank and it will detect all the objects. Okay, so if you leave this sensor open, it will detect anything that comes in collision with this particular object. Okay, so if, say, you have a ball that's way up here and it comes and it gets near it, it's going to say, hey, there's something coming at me. This is what, I got to do something. Okay, so it'll tell to go ahead and do that something. This sensor will be triggered when a detected object is closer than the triggered distance. That's this right here. Okay. Once triggered, it will only stop being valid after the object is farther than the reset distance. So if you have something that you want to make sure that it's within, say, 5 blender units away, that it'll recognize it. But when it gets to, past it, 2 blender units past it, or depending on which measurement you're using, I just say blender units because blender equals 1 meter, or it can equal 1 foot depending on what you have it set to. Okay, but you have it set to 2 blender meters, okay, or 2 blender units. Okay, then when it gets 2 blender units away, it will say, okay, nope, that's okay, it's good, they're no longer near me. but you actually have to have that a bigger distance than the distance that's closest to. Like if you had one at this square and it gets to that square right here, it's going to say, hey, there's something getting too close to me. I'm triggering, until it gets to 2 past it. So it has to be here. And it says, okay, whew, all right, I don't have to do it anymore. Okay, that's the trick to a near sensor. The amazing near sensor. The near sensor detects all directions. It's the game engine equivalent of a Spider-Man sense. Okay, so basically it doesn't matter where it's at. It can be coming in from over here. It can be coming in from over here, here, and here. And the closest one it gets is going to say, hey, it's over here, and over here. Oh, and over here too, and over here too. So it's going to recognize where all these are coming from, especially if you leave it blank. Okay. Next is the radar sensor. Oops, let me try to get that right here. The radar sensor. The radar sensor creates a detection cone locked up to one direction. Okay, so in other words, you pick the axis that it's on. So if you have it at the positive X direction, which is this way, okay, it's going to radiate a cone out this way, like that. Okay, just A, see if I can do a cone. Okay, and we rotate it on Y, rotate Y. And nope, rotate Y. 90? No, negative 90. Rotate Y, negative 90. There we go. So if you have it on a positive X direction, which is what it is right now, anything going in this direction that it sees, okay, it will trigger. Okay. You must choose the axis, the distance, and the angle of your detection radar. Similar to most of the other physics sensors, you can filter the detection per property. Okay, so if you have the property of a cube or something, you can put it here. It's going to be pointing in the X direction. It's 90 degrees angled. And it's a distance of 1 meter. Okay, or 1 blender unit. Okay, troubleshooting and debugging. Now, a lot of people don't pay attention to this because they figure, well, they ain't got to worry about it because of the fact that, they'll figure it after post-processing. Trust me, your troubleshooting and debugging are your main things. You're going to have to look through and see things that are not working right. This window button right here is your friend, okay, because it also has the toggle system console. Shows all the cool stuff in here that actually shows up when you're doing stuff, okay. Just don't click the X. If you click the X, it will not help you because all it will do is close your Blender window out. So always just click outside the window, okay, when it comes up. Nope, time must have done it differently. I minimized is what happened. Okay, there it is. Okay, so the best thing to do is either minimize it, okay, or you can just come back up here to the window and toggle system console. It won't show up down at the bottom. It will be at the top. Okay, so I mean, this right here is your best friend when it comes to that. All right, so in order to easily debug your radar settings in the game, you can turn on the show physics visualization in the game menu. So, okay, and let me switch over to here again. Okay, so in the physics detection, okay, you'll see something like this. It'll show you what your physics bounding box is. Okay, and I'll switch back over. Okay, so where that is pull this out a little bit, and we'll scroll down. Actually, we got to be over here. And if I remember correctly, because they did change it up in 0.2.5, which is Blender 2.79b. So be aware of that. Let's see. And of course, you got to make sure you're in the game engine. Okay, the Blender game engine. Okay, this right here is called visit in your debug properties. You can have your frame rate, you can have your properties pop up, you can also have your physics visualizations, which will, if you hit P on your game, you'll notice that you'll see these red squares and green triangles. That these are your collision boxes and bounds. Okay, and they actually help you to find out why something isn't colliding, why something is colliding that shouldn't be colliding, and a bunch of other things that can actually help you figure out what's going wrong with your game. Okay, so having that set does help. Okay, especially when you're trying to figure out why is something not working the way it's supposed to. Debug and troubleshooting are big time parts of game design, and if you're not in it to try to figure it out, you might not want to be in it. Okay, so we're at 15 minutes, so I'm going to leave it off at ray. Okay, that will be the next one we do next week. We're going to go ahead and do the ray sensor. Okay, so let me switch over to there. Okay, so we're going to leave it there for this week, and we'll play with some more sensors next week, and hopefully you'll get to see my ugly mug again. All right, so with that saying, see you next time.